Welcome back to our program. In December 1998, Yale student Suzanne Jovin was brutally stabbed and killed, and ever since, New Haven police have been looking for her killer.
One suspect who was named was her thesis advisor, James Van de Velde. He has maintained his innocence, and now a friend of his is working to clear Van de Velde's name. Jeff Mitchell of Westport joins us this morning. Welcome. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So you are a software developer who lives in Westport, but you have a old friendship with James Van de Velde. Can you just quickly tell us about that?
Yeah, we go back to our days in Orange, Connecticut, in junior high school and high school. And we sort of lost a little bit of contact after that, going to college, although we saw each other and heard about each other. But really what happened was I was told by, I think it was my mother, she said that, you know, your friend Jim has been named in this horrific murder. And of course you think to yourself, you know, as everybody does, well, maybe this guy could have done it, maybe he didn't do it. But, you know, people always say, it's the cliche, oh, I know so-and-so, he couldn't have done it. You know, that sort of went through my mind, but I thought because I was more logically oriented, well, let me go look into this. And I had this sort of bizarre hobby, which sort of leads into the Enron thing with these scam companies. I had gone on this investor site, we chat board, we talk about stocks, and we sort of looked at these companies that we said, well, these are scams. So we would expose these scams. So you have this sort of logical mindset where you look at these things. I said, well, I'll look at all these facts. And I look at all these facts and I say, this is ridiculous. Nothing makes any sense. It points to this guy.
Name a few aspects of the case that make you certain that James Van de Velde is not the murderer.
Well, the first thing the police has always said is that Suzanne Jovin must have known her killer. Now, why is that? Well, they say, well, because, what, knife wounds or a crime of passion or something like that. But if you look at, I mean, that maybe statistically has some truth to it, although most people who are killed by knives who have a crime of passion are killed in their house, not on a street somewhere. And if you look at her route that she took that day and everything that she said to people, such as, I'm tired, I'm going home, you say, well, she couldn't have been stalked because she's going through lock gates and across the Yale's old campus. She's taking a roundabout route home. So, okay, she wasn't stalked. Then, you know, could somebody have offered her a ride or something like that? Well, her route has her almost about a minute or two from being home. So that doesn't seem like a possibility. Was it a secret meeting? Well, if you're secretly meeting somebody, you're not almost, you know, home. You're probably waiting somewhere for a ride or something. So none of the usual things that you would think of for how she could know somebody. And then from the time that she was last probably alive in the Yale campus area to where she was found dead was only about 20 minutes later. So
what's do you have a theory?
Well, I think it just points to some sort of a, you know, random act of violence. I mean, somebody saw an opportunity there, maybe to rob her, maybe for some other reason, and probably more than one person, because it's hard for one person in a vehicle. We know she had to have been in a vehicle to get from where she was probably last seen around the Yale campus to a couple of miles away within 20 minutes. So it's hard for one person driving a car to get someone in, you know, sit in the driver's seat, you don't want you to go around to the other side. I mean, you just don't have that, you know, physical force to keep somebody there. So it's probably more than one person.
Jeff, have you had an opportunity to talk with Jim Van de Velde at all since this happened and you started kind of like your own investigation? Have you talked with him and tried to kind of compare notes, so to speak, on this?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I mean, he's obsessed with it because you sit there when it first happens to you. See, this is an unusual situation because in most of these cases, there's some sort of evidence that's presented where you can fight and say, wait a minute, that's not true. Well, here we have a situation where he's been named a suspect that never in 3 years has anybody had one piece of evidence at all. There's no blood, there's no fiber, there's no, you know, motive, there's no fingerprints, there's nothing at all. Not one thing that you can say, hey, that's not true. It's just the police named him 3 days after the murder. They interviewed him, and since then, that was even before they interviewed witnesses, before they analyzed the evidence they had, and it was ludicrous. It was almost like, let's make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're on this national stage, everybody's watching us, we have to calm everybody down, we'll name this guy, and hope to heck that we're right, and we'll do everything we can to make the public think that we've got him. And everything that they did, I mean, they put up posters that led from where the crime scene was down to his place. They would put articles in the Register or the local papers saying that we found forensic evidence, which turned out to be like a driver's manual in a bush. I mean, everything that they would put in the paper would make people believe that, hey, maybe we got this guy, but there was never anything at all.
Jeff, is your goal now? I mean, you're going to continue your work on this with the hope that what? Because you're really a private citizen.
Right. Well, first of all, I think the case has been treated more like a feature story. Here's an intelligent, you know, co-ed at Yale who was killed. Here's a professor who's, you know, well-liked, very popular. He's the so-called prime suspect. So let's focus on these two people, whereas it's a murder. We have to treat this as a murder. And if we get the facts of the case out there, then people could probably maybe help solve this thing. And there's a lot of facts that were never revealed, maybe some of them like 2.5 years later. And had the police revealed those facts right away, they probably would have solved this thing 2 years ago.
Have you had any communication with the police department and offered any evidence to them or any theories? Or?
Well, I have my, my sort of the thread, as they call it, on the Silicon Investor site where I've talked about it, and I know they've read that. And I've petitioned the Freedom of Information Act Commission in Connecticut for information from these police files, so they know about that. And of course, they had to show up for the meeting, and so they know of me, about me. They know everything I've done.
And you're on the front page of the New Haven Register.
So I
this
mean,
week.
I've been known for them for a long time. So my theories have been out there. So they've had opportunities to look into that.
Jim's in the Navy now, are doing work with the Navy. What's he doing? What are his spirits like?
Well, he's got a job, and you know, he's doing some things that he likes. But you know, he used to be sort of a star in the Bush administration, and at a certain level, pay scale or whatever they have in the government, and he's not really reached where he should be.
You're saying in the previous Bush administration?
I mean, he's a guy who national security, international security, and here we have a time where he was holding seminars at Yale about people like bin Laden and terrorism, and that's his talent. He should be out there helping the country in this time and not being sort of a lower level position on this.
Stay in touch with us, and we'll stay in touch with you too.
Sure.
Thanks for coming on.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And that's it for this week's broadcast.
We'll see you back here next Sunday for another edition of Connecticut Newsmakers.